Okay, we can start. Welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming to this third day of Alcantara Dialogue, the joint project between World Bank, Connect4Climate, and Alcantara. Today, we will discuss about CSR. So the first day, the panels were dealing with the relationship between design and sustainability. Yesterday, the second day, was the turn of design and fashion. And today, corporation should put forward their ideas and consideration. And now I would like to introduce you Zoe Fox from Mashable, that will be the moderator of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Are you having?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here on day 3 of the Alcantara Dialogues. I'm so excited to be able to take questions as well from the audience and on Twitter using the hashtag C4C Alcantara. So everyone watching along, please join in the conversation and let us know what you'd like to hear. Before I introduce the esteemed panelists to my left, I'd like to say a bit about who I am and why I'm here. My name is Zoe Fox. I am the editorial content coordinator for Mashable. And Mashable is a technology and social media focused news organization, which is really focused on how tech can empower people. And what we do is we put on different social good events. So I'm really excited to be here and participating with Alcantara and the World Bank in something that is so similar to the mission that I work on all the time. And now to the panelists to my left. First we have Nobel Peace Prize laureate Betty Williams, who in 1976 was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in Northern Ireland, and she has made a career out of fighting for the rights of women, children, and peace. So it's a pleasure to have her joining us. Next we have Julie Allen, who is the creative director for social responsibility for Viacom International. Julie runs the pro-social media campaigns for all of the MTV networks, and we're really excited to hear how she's using social media in those campaigns. And then third, we have Silvio De Girolamo, who is Autogrill Group's Chief Audit and Sustainability Executive. Now, Autogrill is the largest provider for travelers of food, beverages, and services. And then finally, we have Kelly Rigg, the Executive Director of the Global Call for Climate Action, which is a network of 400 organizations, and Kelly has been fighting for climate change for the last 30 years. Now I'm going to invite each of the panelists to present some opening remarks, beginning with Betty.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I didn't realize I had to go first. That's okay. I think that anybody who is involved in the work of peace and justice must also be involved in the work of helping Mother Earth, because it's completely unjust what we're doing to our planet. And I mean, that's applicable worldwide. You know, we could talk about deeper issues, and you know, when you look at countries, and I have to say this because I would feel very, very amiss if I didn't say it. If you look at a country like China, now I'm not talking about the Chinese people, please. Chinese people are wonderful. They're hardworking, good people. But when a country is allowed to pollute to that degree, it makes the issues that we're all working on so much more difficult to do. And then we have the United States of America, which is a huge pollutant as well. I mean, I look at my country, where I live, Ireland. I mean, my God, you can hardly find it on the map. And we have more going ecologically and more sustainable ways to deal with everyday life in the form of plastics and paper and bottles. And I think to myself, you know, it would be difficult indeed, but maybe Ireland's lucky because we're small. It's easier for us to do it than it would be anywhere else in the world. But I don't wear any kind of blinkers when I think, yes, I'm doing my bit. But we have to challenge these governments who are not doing their bit. and that the whole world knows that we know we have to have a non-violent uprising of the world core people to bring to terms with those governments the very fact that no matter how small we may be doing, what they're doing on a daily basis is destroying mankind. I feel very strongly about that. So I can't come up here and just talk about nice little pleasantries, like if you recycle, you'll be okay. I think it's all of our responsibility to challenge these governments, every single one of us.
Thank you so much. And next we'll hear from Julie Allen.
Hi, so as Zoe said, I'm Creative Director for Social Responsibility at Viacom International Media Networks with a specific focus on MTV. In this role, it's my job to come up with ideas that really resonate socially with our audiences all around the world. One of the key initiatives that I co-founded and work on is something called MTV Voices, which we're dubbing as a mouthpiece for the millennial generation, because we believe that they are the generation that can change things, particularly when it comes to issues like climate change. It's a place to inspire and get inspired about these issues that matter most. And we're very much focused on sharing first-person accounts of relatively ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world. And we're also leveraging talent and artists to use it as a place to connect with their fans and kind of generate interest from fan bases and get them involved in the cause that they're fighting for. Sorry, a little bit of... Don't know where that came from. So through Voices, we've done a lot of climate change and sustainability-focused work, and this has ranged from partnerships with brands and organisations through to personal accounts that I was talking about of young people making a difference on the ground. Some of our partnerships have included collaborations with global ad agencies, where we've charged them with creating PSAs that really resonate with our audiences. And the brief is always to kind of make it very MTV-ish. One thing that we do come up against, particularly when dealing with issues like climate change and many others, is that sometimes it's easy to come across as kind of preaching and being worthy. So we handle it like any other piece of MTV content. It has to be entertaining and engaging, and that's very key for us. Another initiative that we ran a while back was at Cannes Film Festival, when we got creatives there to create a short film in 48 hours, kind of got lots of views and the audience engaged, which was great. We also have partnered with a number of production companies, namely one of them TV, which is Television for the Environment, and they went out and shot a whole bunch of short films with young people who were kind of really doing extraordinary work on the ground, from a girl who was creating her own chocolate company in her kind of local village that had gone global, to a girl that was working with the coral reefs in Bali. We always ensure that the characters that we cast are engaging and aspirational, and that's very key. If our audiences can connect with the people that we're showing on air and online, then they're much more likely to think, actually, I can do that, and take action too. And then, of course, we've also partnered with the World Bank and their Connect4Climate campaign. We ran an initiative with them called Voices for Climate. You may have seen the videos running in the background earlier, where we invited young people all over the world to create their own music video that was focused around sustainability and climate change. And the winner actually gets to come and spend time with MTV and kind of edit their video professionally. They get something really positive out of it, and obviously then it gets broadcast to a wider audience. I think one of the key things to note is that we're all about making climate change and sustainability accessible and fun. And it's often said that the key to successfully engaging businesses in CSR is by targeting their strengths. And I think with MTV, our strength is definitely our airwaves, our global appeal, our access to young people, and our creativity. And it's that combination that really allows us to have an impact on these kind of issues. And, you know, with MTV being such an influential brand to these young people that I say, you know, have the power to change the world, it's important that we continue to take a stand and, you know, continue to sustain this world that we all love and want to continue living in. So.
And next we'll hear from Silvio De Girolamo.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to sharing with you some ideas, some opportunity to increase the approach and the attitude on sustainability, because we know that we are part of this world. We are part of the people that lives in this world. We are one world. Some person when talk about the experience around the world, they talk about the life as an experiment. It's true, because life is an experiment. We need to understand that this is not just one way to perform the activities. And inside the world, we need to engage, to involve the people, to understand that together, not alone, we can contribute to increase the opportunity to have the sustainability approach and the sustainability view. This is very important, because in this world, in this context, nobody can change without the opinion and the support in the effort of the other person. The involvement is very important. It's very important, not just different company, but between company, between organization, public organization, non-profit organization. And the engagement is also important with the person that operate inside the organization, because my job is how I can increase the attitude of people to embed the sustainability inside the operative management of the day by day. Of course, this is very important also that to give the opportunity to understand that sustainability is long-term vision of the world, long-term of the vision of the company, long-term of the vision of the way of the life. And it's a long trip, it's a long approach, it's a long experiment, because the life is an experiment. But if we are able to put in place different way to perform the activity, we are in the correct way, because I would like to stress this concept. The sustainability is a long-term vision, is take care of each organization, also of course, and at the same time take care of the companies, take care of the world.
Thank you, Silvio. And next we'll hear from Kelly Rigg.
Thanks. So there's really 5 things you need to know about climate change. You can put it in very simple terms. First, it's happening. Secondly, it's going to be bad. Third, it's us that's causing it. Fourth, scientists are in agreement. And fifth, and most importantly, if we act urgently, we can do something about it. There's hope. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of these points in a few slides. Can we cue up the first slide? About 20 years ago, the next slide, sorry. About 20 years ago, the world's, oops, that's the last slide. Yeah, that one. About 20 years ago, the world's leaders came together and adopted a climate convention, a legally binding agreement, whose purpose was to prevent dangerous interference with the climate system. And then it took them about 17 years after that to actually define what that meant. And they concluded that this would mean, in practice, trying to limit global temperature rise to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the actions already committed by governments, the pledges they've made to date, are taking us to a 4-degree world. Last year, the World Bank put out a report describing what a 4-degree world would look like, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that it was pretty grim reading, and maybe that's even an understatement. World Bank President Kim described it as devastating, and more recently, IMF Chief Christine Lagarde put it in much more technical financial terms befitting her office when she said that future generations are going to be roasted, toasted, fried, and grilled. Next slide, please. So how urgent is it? If we're looking at 4 degrees by the end of this century, it sounds like we have all the time in the world, but in fact, because of the lag in the climate system, the actions we take now, the emissions we emit now, are going to determine whether we make that 2-degree target or blow right past it. And unfortunately, the International Energy Agency has said we've got about 5 years before the emissions locked in to a 2-degree scenario will be committed. So 5 years before we're really beyond that point. Now, what do they mean by locking it in? If you construct a coal-fired power plant that's got a 60-year lifespan, and you think about how many emissions are going to be coming from that plant over the next 60 years, you can add that up. So you think we've got about 5 years to transform the energy system. We can buy a bit more time if we use energy a bit more efficiently than we do now. But we also need to remember that there are 1.3 billion people in the world who don't even have access to electricity yet. So you can see the challenge facing us. Next slide, please. The financial community are just starting to deal with the implications of this. They've recently concluded, and this is again not just, this isn't green hyperbole, this is financial institutions, including the International Energy Agency, basically say that between 2/3 and 3/5 of the fossil fuel reserves, the ones we already know about before we even go exploring for more, can't be burnt. They need to be left in the ground. Next slide, please. You can imagine the implications of that. So, I mean, really the time is now. We have to start phasing out greenhouse gas emissions. The longer we wait, the harder it's going to be. Next slide. So, I just want to emphasize, as I said at the beginning of this talk, that there were 5 things that we needed to know. The 5th one is that if we act urgently, there's hope. And that's the one I want to leave you with. And it's really, there is no magic silver bullet here. We have to, all the different sectors have to play their part. So for example, governments need to create the incentives for business to take action. We have, at the moment, we are still subsidizing and incentivizing the continued burning of fossil fuels. We need to stop doing that, and in fact, we need to start taxing carbon pollution. But secondly, we as members of the public need to start putting our money where our mouths are. We need to give that signal to business about the goods we want to buy. We want to buy sustainable goods, and we also need to hold governments accountable to those promises they made 20 years ago, to the promises that they keep making over and over, but so far are leaving unfilled. And then finally, what can business do, getting these signals from the public and government? Businesses need to move beyond the short-termism of quarterly reporting and profits. We need to start looking at long-term sustainability. And that means we either need to change the rules by which the accounting practices are done, or we need to see industries working together, competitors moving together at the same time and taking us forward. And finally, I think we need to start changing the discourse around climate change. We need to actually make people inspired about it. I have a very close friend who passed away last year. His name was Dragan Klajic, who is part of the culture community, theater community. And he once said to me, you know, you NGOs, you can talk about this problem all you want, but you're not going to really reach people until the culture community, the arts and theater gets into it, because they have the power to make people visualize the future and to feel what this is like. And so that's why I'm very excited to be here today and to talk to people at this gathering. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the major things of Connect4Climate is bringing together diverse parties. And as each of you mentioned individually, one of the keys here for creating a sustainable future is building partnerships. And I wanted to know if each of you could highlight one partnership that you think is working really well and has brought progress, and then somewhere that two communities that aren't linked yet that could really help to advance this conversation. And we can take this in any order if anyone wants to chime in.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Okay, so one partnership that is already in existence, which I referenced previously in my intro, is the one we're doing with MTV Voices, doing with the World Bank and Connect4Climate. I think the kind of world stage and the access to people on the ground that maybe MTV can't reach for whatever reason, the World Bank are a very valuable partner for us in that respect. we can put the message out through our channels and our networks. So combined, we're pretty much reaching a lot of the world, which I think is really valuable. The fact that we are using entertainment and music to inspire is also very valuable. You said you need to inspire more. You know, that's something we're very much trying to do. The fact that, like I said before, that it can come across sometimes as being a bit NGO-ish and a bit worthy, adding the MTV brand to that makes it feel a little bit more exciting. So it's good that we can use our brand for good. In terms of where I would like to see more partnerships happening from my perspective is with brands, consumer-facing brands, getting involved with what we do and kind of putting money behind it and campaigning through their products and their existing audiences around the globe. I think partnerships are really important because, as I say, you get to reach two different blocks of people, which is very valuable.
Well, sometimes I wonder to myself, is this really happening? You know, what's happening in my life I'm talking about. Because 10 years ago, I was at a summit, a Gorbachev summit in Rome. And one of my friends here told me, Laureate, she said, they're threatening to dump nuclear waste in the region Basilicata, in a place called Sant'Arcangelo. And there's the region there, you've got to see it to believe it. You know, it's just outstandingly beautiful. And I found myself getting so angry at the very thought that anybody, nuclear waste is a whole issue that's not, you can't dream of what we've got to do to get rid of that stuff, you know? And I threw my whole being behind helping these people in Basilicata to stop the dumping of nuclear waste. We succeeded. It was very, very difficult. And we have now formed partnerships down there. And we've taken a situation that was going to be dumping of nuclear waste, and we're building a city of peace. So there's something everybody can do in that region. You know, this is Design Week here, which is one of the reasons that I brought China up in my initial, because most of the designers, I mean, I listened to a lady yesterday who told us in the audience, I was in the audience, that her magazine had to come out in glossy because they wouldn't use recycled paper. And I thought, my God, I would be one of the first in the line to buy that magazine that was using recycled paper. I don't care if the paper's shiny or not shiny. If there's a good article in it, I'm going to read it. You know what I mean? It's not. So maybe we have to look at what the designers here, because the markup on clothing is through the roof. A pair of jeans, I mean, it was a whole program. My daughter and I were discussing this last night. Well, there is one company in China that produces jeans for nearly all of the world. That includes the designers right through. I mean, these are big issues that really we have to look at. If the designers, particularly here in Milan and anywhere else in the world, are using that kind of labor, and then we're paying huge amounts of money for a designer's name, I don't think so. We have to hold the designers responsible for what they're doing as well. Much as I love Armani's clothes, much as we all love to look at Valentino, I mean, the designs, I could never wear them, but they're mind-bending, you know? But look what people are paying for these things. I mean, we really have to hold, you know, I wish to goodness we could have had some of these designers in the room to listen to the last 2 days of what's been going on here, because we could say to them, shame on you. Shame on you. You create things that people can't afford, and then we pay a fortune so as you can live in luxury? I don't think so. You're not speaking for me as a female of the species. That's how strongly I feel about it.
Yeah, I would like to sharing with you one experiment of our company, because the life is an experiment, and we decided 2 years ago to start with sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, we talk, of course, also to take in consideration our planet, but also take in consideration the access to our point of sales, because we manage point of sales around the world. And this was, let's say, a good experiment, I suppose, because we, before start with the project of the point of sales, we engaged a ONG named Spirito di Stella, and they helped us to understand what will be the best solution to assure the access to the point of sales to all the people. All the people means disadvantage, different people with different needs and so on. And thanks to this engagement, this partnership with this association, we were able to prepare this point of sales, also taking in consideration these needs, not only, but I would like to sharing with you a video that can give you the opportunity to understand better this experiment in sustainability, how we can implement this, how we can demonstrate that we can go in this direction. Please start with the video. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is the experiment, and you can visit because it's nearest Milano. It's very nearest Milano, and this is one of the experiments in sustainability. And our claim about sustainability, shape our tomorrow. We believe that we can shape our tomorrow. Thank you very much.
So my organization, the Global Call for Climate Action, we have around 400 organizations that we partner with, and I was trying to think your question about where are the partnerships not happening yet, and it's hard for me to think of any that there aren't. Maybe not, we're not connecting everybody together, but we're connected to somebody who's connecting another range. I can't think of any sector that's not networked into this movement in one way or another. So I would actually like to say which partnership I think needs to be broken. And that is the partnership between the fossil fuel interests, the large corporate interests, and governments. Because really, you know, all of the climate politics comes down to really the art of the possible. We can't go any further because, and the reason why it's not possible is because of that stranglehold. And I think that it's up to us to overcome that and break that partnership by, first of all, helping give a stronger voice to progressive business and also to the renewables industry. I mean, there's amazing statistics about the energy revolution that's underway. The fact is, I mean, I think the one statistic which says it all for me is the fact that the fossil fuel prices are going up and up. They're getting harder to come by and more expensive, whereas the prices of renewables are coming down. They're getting cheaper every day. So there is this revolution happening, and it's just insane that our policy is still dictated by the lobbyists and the fossil fuel interests.
Now, one of the things that Ms. Williams brought up is the concept with climate change of you need to see it to believe it. And unfortunately, we don't all want to see the effects of climate change on our lives, but it is something that more and more people are experiencing. Now, when you're trying to rally people behind a cause, be it from the business perspective, the NGO perspective, or from a grassroots cause, have you seen people mobilizing around climate change and making it something that you can, share your passion for this issue with communities that might not seem to understand how it affects them?
Well, I think it's interesting that, extreme weather in your own neighborhood, in your direct experience, seems to be a huge motivator. Although we find in some countries, people who don't have as much understanding about the issue of climate change, if you ask them about it, they don't necessarily know. But when you ask them about whether they're experiencing the impacts of climate change, just, drought, and oh yes, I mean, people are experiencing it. And I think that is a powerful motivator when you start to see, first of all, it happening in your own community. And second of all, when you hear about it from people in your own community. I think it's important to remember that it's not just about preaching to the converted or, trying to pass this down. It's important for people to hear it from people they trust, to take it on board from their own role models or whatever. So I think that we need to network up this movement in a way so that it's not, one big speaker standing on high, but rather it's spreading it throughout the community.
You've also got the awfulness in the United States of this new thing, fracking. Well, they're digging into the earth and they're polluting waters, and I mean, it's absolutely horrendous what's happening. And I think you say the fossil fuel people, I prefer to call them the oil companies, are holding the world to ransom, because that's exactly what they're doing. Shell Oil, what they did in the Gulf of Mexico, I mean, we have seen what the oil companies are doing, but it's always, again, down to the almighty dollar. We could have had an electric car in our world 40 years ago, but it didn't suit the oil companies. You see, when we take these issues up, we have to speak our truth clearly and distinctly, because you then allow others to speak theirs. So if it's an oil company, I'm going to say Shell Oil is fracking in the United States of America, which is not good for the American people. But the American people don't know that, except those who have suffered from fracking. A gentleman turned on a tap in his kitchen and he put a match to it and it went on fire. I mean, these things have got to be challenged, not just from the highest level, but from mere mortals like you and I.
And on that note, I think it's important to make people realize that they have a responsibility and a part to play in this. We were just talking earlier, I was talking to someone about how sometimes this feels like it's too big a problem for one person to get involved in on their own. But, certainly from our point of view, from MTV's point of view, if we can make people realize that they can play a part in owning this and being responsible for the future, and that small changes, when they all come together, do in fact make a big difference, is really important for us. What's interesting for us is that we have seen a kind of shift in perspective of how young people think. they are becoming more socially responsible and aware of their environment around them. In fact, one of the MTV kind of brand values right now is warm is the new cool, as in we kind of care more for kind of what's going on around us. And I think, you know, I always look at it in that, and I said it in my intro, that this world is a great world that we live in, and, you know, if we don't continue to care and look after it, it won't be here for much longer. One of the things I like to do when I need a bit of perspective is to watch Carl Sagan videos on YouTube, the kind of pale blue dot video. There's nothing like that for a bit of perspective and realizing that actually we all have a part to play.
I think that is the same also inside the companies. Because it's very important that the people need to understand that why they have to act in a specific way. I explain better. In the past, maybe many times inside the company, it was satisfying and necessary to receive instruction from the top management or receive prescription from top management to implement something. Today is different because the people need to understand why they have to act in this specific way. For the sustainability is the same idea, also because the people inside the company are citizens, are employees, are consumers, and we need to sharing with our colleagues why I ask to the other people to act in different way than the past. If the people understand the real reason that now, again, is the same reason if the people as citizens, if the people as employees, if the people as consumers, okay, the people can act, real act, because they understand that is the real problem to solve.
And just jumping off of that, what's the conversation that you have then in those meetings where you have to explain to people this is why acting on making sustainable decisions is important right now? How can you convince either the average person or the people sitting around you at a board table?
Yeah, first of all, I don't need to write a communication or let's say opportunity to sign and stated the announcement that starting from tomorrow Autogrill becomes sustainable. It's not the real good to proceed. No, we start to identify some target to reduce energy consumption, to reduce the CO2 emission. But the real thing is that the people has to understand that if you increase this approach, you can receive the return. You can receive the return because you can save the money, you can save the reduction the emission, and you have to align to different target, and you have to convince the people with also with some practice that you are able to put in place in some place inside the company. This is the very important thing. For example, you have seen the video. For our company, this is very important because it's a laboratory, but not just for the other person that doesn't work in organization. Also for the employees that work in the organization, because they can understand that you can act, and if you can act, you can receive some values. This is a very important thing. Contaminate and demonstrate that you can act, starting also from the practice day by day.
Now, I know many of you have been working in the climate change landscape for a while, and Julie, you just mentioned that now for youth, warm is the new cool. And I'm just curious, what changes have you seen in common consciousness about this issue, and do you think it's looking up from here? Has warm really become the new cool for youth, and what role can youth play in making progress right now?
I think As I said, warm is the new cool is one of kind of MTV's brand values. And through our research, we do extensive research with our audiences all around the world. And the feedback that we get from them, how they're interacting with causes, the issues that they tell us that they're interested in and want to get involved in, has kind of shaped that. We were talking earlier about this kind of shift in interest towards kind of like sustainable fashion. I was impressed to see in Times Square the other day when I came at my office, there was a huge display for H&M's new sustainable fashion range, which they're really getting behind, which is great to see. And as Betty was saying, you know, women do have a part to play there in kind of demanding sustainable materials and clothing. I think just in general, we have just seen youth more mobilized. I think social media has played a big part in kind of involving people and kind of letting them get closer to the causes that they want to be attached to. And I think we've seen it with lots of causes, including climate change. Yeah.
Anyone else want to answer that question about the role that the changes that we've seen?
Well, I just want to also comment on the involvement of youth. I think the youth movements are the most exciting aspect of the movement from where I sit anyway. I can tell you, for example, at the last climate summit in Doha, we saw the birth of the Arab Youth Climate Movement. I mean, these were young people in countries that, you know, don't necessarily always have a lot of freedom to express their opinions. And they were really powerful. They were a powerful force at that meeting. And we see that we have our own project in the Tick, Tick, Tick campaign, which is called the Adopt a Negotiator program, which is bringing young bloggers and sort of homegrown journalists to these meetings to report on what's happening in the negotiations, get those reported back out in the home countries, because we're seeing a real failure of the media, traditional media, to report on these issues in a way that doesn't contain false balance, quote unquote, you know, in which they have to put the, you know, skeptic argument on the side and to poo-poo what's happening at the UN negotiations as all being a big waste of time. And what we're seeing with these youth delegates is that they're very critical, but they're passionate. And they're not indoctrinated. They're not told this is the party line, you have to communicate this. They form their own opinions, they write about it, and they're actually changing the landscape of how this you know, how these issues are being reported, because they're showing up in blogs, in op-ed pieces, in different kinds of ways. And I think that this is one of the most important parts about changing the discourse on climate change, is reaching out through young people, and particularly bearing in mind that, you know, they're the ones that are going to inherit the world that we're creating right now. This is their future we're talking about. So it's really important that they have a voice in shaping that future.
I mean, one of the incredible things about youth is that they are so connected and they're constantly sharing and they're constantly engaging with each other. I'm wondering, how can companies harness that power of youth and take advantage of that constant sharing that they're doing? Especially because companies might have more experience with, you know, knowing the background on the issues and knowing where.
Well, again, we can take that back to the fashion world. I mean, young people are told this is fashionable. They're told this is in this week, and then next week it's something else. I mean, I really believe it. I'm maybe a wee bit old-fashioned because I'm a mother and a grandmother, but I actually believe that change begins in your home. You know, it's sort of, had I brought my children up differently to the way I brought them up, and my grandchild, who is so earth-friendly, she makes me weep. You know, she would lift a worm and put it back in the garden where I would say, ooh, you know. She sees that as what her mother taught her, as I taught her mother. So a lot of it can be taught by women. I think women are an essential role in this. Not because, you know, we made a lot of mistakes in trying, when we took our feminism and made it feministic, instead of sort of keeping our great strength of being a giver of life, a female of the species, and hey, we can work beside any man, you know, in that great respect that we would teach men to have for us, which we should have been getting many moons ago. But then we became man-like. We started almost getting worse, you know. It's like when the English came to Ireland, they taught us how to be violent, and we got better at it than they were. You know, we outgrew the teacher. So I think the role of women now should be to educate in the home. Every single thing on earth has a right to be here. Every creation on earth has a right to be here. And we have no right to suck from Mother Earth any more than she can give us. And it's very basic. And you know, children are like little sponges. They pick it up and they run with it. Because my grandbaby Brianna has taught that since she was this big. And now she knows what a sensual being is. She can tell you the names of all the flowers. I mean, I'm not going to go on about my grandchild. I'm just saying that, well, I could if you want. But anyway, I'm telling you as a mother and a grandmother, we can do a lot in our own living rooms to change the mind of how we treat those issues.
To add to that one, you know, women are on the front lines of climate change. Just want, you know, in the places where it's hitting the hardest, it's hitting women even harder. So but they don't want to be characterized as the victims here. I think women have a really strong role to play in the leadership on this issue, but I think it is fair to note that they do get hit the hardest.
Did anyone else want to add as to how companies can harness the power of youth? And I don't know, one of you from your experience working with, you know, a large brand, how can, you know, youth and social media be used for advancing this cause?
I think I'd just reiterate what I said previously about two kind of very powerful brands coming together, a big consumer-facing brand and a media-facing brand. So if we can put messages out through our network of channels and brands, particularly brands who have, like you say, got more insight and knowledge into kind of what is really going on behind the scenes when it comes to climate change, that could be very powerful. But I just think branded partnerships in general are always kind of powerful things to initiate. You know, we have experience doing branding campaigns with our other CSR initiatives that we do, and they've been very successful in kind of mobilizing youth. You know, if you think MTV and all of its kind of social media, Facebook and Twitter pages, like, you know, tens of millions of people that are engaging. And when you take another powerful brand, say you took Pepsi or Coke and added all of their kind of fan base to that, you're suddenly kind of doubling your message to the number of people that you're accessing.
I think that the companies in this period have we distinguish if we talk about communication related to sustainability, strategic sustainability, means nearest the core business of the company, or if you talk about CSR program, philanthropy program, and so on. Because in the first case, I think that the company are able to demonstrate and communicate through the sustainability report, but the sustainability report is mainly direct to the financial community, not to the other stakeholders. If you talk about the second aspect, yes, many companies communicate the CSR single program, but is nearest to the commercial and marketing activities, not pure CSR, because the understanding how the company has to proceed on CSR, you need to understand if the CSR is part of the strategy of the company, and if the CSR approach is nearest to the core business. For our company, it's very important to communicate with the stakeholder, and we need to increase the opportunity to communicate the sustainability approach inside the point of sales, because for us it's the first media that we have the opportunity to utilize. And now we have in mind also to start with to communicate with, by social media, by social network. This is my opinion about this.
I'm just curious, do you feel that there's a public deficit of knowledge, or do people know enough about this issue? And if so, and if there's kind of a discrepancy between that? Are there things that people seem to get, and are there things that people seem to misunderstand?
Well, I think there's a whole range, a whole spectrum of understanding. I think the slides that I presented know that the mass majority of the public don't know that. But in terms of those first 5 things I said, I think they are becoming increasingly knowledgeable that it's happening, that it's going to be bad, that we're causing it. Scientists agree. They're not buying the denier arguments anymore. And that, there's hope, there's something we can do about it. I think that has gone, is certainly well recognized in most of the Western societies. Obviously, it's a different reality in countries that are, still trying to get their people out of poverty. So I think that we need more education for sure. We need to be talking about it in schools or whatever, but I think that in general now the awareness is pretty strong.
It depends if the companies would like to communicate, or if the companies would like to anticipate the needs of the consumers, because in this period we have some situation where the consumer don't know what they expect to receive also about the information, the communication. Maybe I think that the one task of sustainability is also to anticipate the needs of the consumers, not only in terms of product, but also in terms of communication, information that you need to give to the consumer in order to facilitate the better choice. I think this is is a task of sustainability, for sure.
I think people have a good understanding of what's involved, but it's really interesting what Betty was saying earlier about how it begins at home, and how getting people at a very young age is so vital. And, we're the people in this room, and kind of everyone around the world has a part to play in that, because I think if you grow up with certain values and certain understanding of the world around you, then you're much more likely to pass that on, as Betty says. It's much more difficult if people don't have that knowledge, then convince them that they need to kind of get involved and make change. You're kind of starting off on a back foot, whereas if it all kind of started at home from the first place, we'd be in a much better place.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the H&M billboards, which advertise that their fabrics are sustainable, that's a very easy way for people to access it. But how could people, if fabric isn't being advertised, how do we get them to be aware, I should be looking for that sustainable fabric choice, or I should be looking for the clean energy options? Are there any, ways that we can make sure that people start asking those questions themselves when it's not presented toward them?
I don't like going shopping with my granddaughter now, because she looks at every label, and if it's made in China, I'm just not allowed to buy it, end of, you can't buy that, Nanny. It's, but I think, there are no easy cures for this. We all know that. There's no, if we in this panel could wave a wee magic wand and say, well, we have the answer. But as you so rightly said, it's little by little, piece by piece, building those blocks of people, which I find now when I travel, that people in the jungle have much more knowledge of Mother Earth than people in major cities. It's just because we live in consumerism. We have become a consumerized world, and part of consumerism is apathy. It goes big time with consumerism. In other words, it's not my problem. I have enough to eat. It's not my problem. Apathy kills more people in the world than wars do. We have to awaken the people who are being apathetic. And it was only in that television interview with the Fracking that the man said, very poignantly said, I never realized it was this bad until it was in my living room. See, sometimes people don't see what's on their doorstep. They only see it when it's in the living room, and by then it's too late. But I believe there's an awakening in the world, as you so rightly said, there's an awakening in the world, particularly among women, that this indeed is a reality, and this indeed is something we are duty-bound as mothers to do something about. There's a slow awakening of that. But while we have the hundreds, millions and hundreds of millions spent day and daily on advertising, day and daily on bombs and ammunition and better ways to destroy humanity, could we not take a percentage of military budgets and turn it all around? I've been saying that for 30 years. We have got to challenge military budgets. We must, even if we were just getting 1% of 1% of military budgets, we could really help climate change in a huge way.
I think, I agree with that, but unfortunately, price is still a really big factor. You know, young people have your clothing allowance, you go to H&M because you can afford the clothes there, and I think the notion that we have to, that sustainable clothes cost so much more, and you have to actually look for the label to find the one that's sustainable is just crazy. And the reason for that is because the money, there's different pockets. We're paying so much for climate change out of one pocket in terms of healthcare costs. There's amazing studies out about how much coal-fired power is costing us in terms of health, premature deaths, asthma, or whatever. But that's not coming out of your pocketbook. It's coming out of your tax dollars, and everyone can complain about taxes. But in fact, there's this hidden price that we're not paying in the clothes that we buy. And so if those externalities were to be incorporated into the price of clothes, for example, by paying a carbon tax or to stop subsidizing fossil fuels, then regular clothes would also become a lot more expensive, and sustainable clothes would become, in comparison, relatively affordable. I don't think you should have to rely on people reading the labels. Those should just be the normal thing that you have to buy. And so, you know, you can either ask governments to pass laws saying this is what has to be done, or you can create incentives through the market, but whatever, at the moment, we're not doing either of those things. And we're just, you know, companies are just, we're just all free riding off of the, you know, the extra costs that we're not counting as part of our consumer habit.
You know, we have a wonderful product out there called hemp, but because of the connotations of marijuana, countries aren't allowed to grow hemp, which is it's a beautiful fabric. I mean, I didn't know until this morning. You can get wonderful facts and figures off Google, you know. And I didn't know until this morning that the Emperor of Japan only wears clothes made of hemp. It's one of the greatest products in the world, but because of the connotation of marijuana, people don't grow it. I mean, it's crazy, absolutely insane that this should be allowed to happen with a perfectly natural product called hemp.
Now I wanted to turn to the room to see if there were any questions for the panelists, if anyone had anything that they wanted to ask. And I'm not sure that I can see everyone from where I'm sitting, but.
I fully understand that price can be an issue for the final consumer and move versus a sustainable product. Unfortunately, we see this also in the luxury goods and for people that do not have the problem of price. So we should start from luxury goods. Could be a strategy.
I agree.
Is there any comment?
I also couldn't hear too well.
Well, I was very impressed to learn that this whole construction has been made from sustainable materials with the Alcantara. It's very impressive. If we can make something that's good out of sustainable material, then we should be using sustainable material for everything.
But you know, your company is taking a lead role in the world in this. Maybe we could say, you know, I will speak about your company everywhere I go now, and you should be encouraging. No, because you're doing what's right, not because if you were doing what was wrong, I'd speak about that as well. You know? But you're doing what's right. So I want to talk about your company when I go out in the world, and maybe you'll get a few calls to ask you how'd you do it. I know there's a wonderful man in Austria whose company was recycling draperies. But the banks have now put him out of business. He's running his company, but the banks own it, if you know what I mean. It's a wonderful man. I'm going to be in Austria next week meeting with this man. I'd love to link him up with you when I go there.
I was not so much referring to the industry. I think that one of the key points, you have been talking about the politics, you have been talking of the big industry, you have been talking about the connection between politics and oil industry very clearly. I think a very important point, a very important link is normal citizen, the one who economically are called final consumer. And they could play a huge role in this change. Something that to me seems very clear is that the final consumer, very often, they do not know. They have a very confused idea of what's sustainable and what's not sustainable. And I feel pretty much sure that once a final consumer knows and has this information, and not only about carbon neutrality, which is a key point, but also about social issues behind industry and behind production, probably they would shift their decision-making process, and they would refuse some goods that are totally unsustainable, and sometimes these goods, totally unsustainable, are considered to be cool, attractive. So I think that also education of the final consumer and information regarding what's really happening in the market could help us very much. So I don't know if you have any comment.
I agree completely, and it's why I was saying we need to change the discourse around this. We actually need to create better conversations about this so people do better understand. And I think it is happening in some places. I know that, for example, driving those big gas-guzzling SUVs have become very socially unpopular now, and in some countries, a lot of people are quite critical. They actually vandalize cars when they see them and get quite aggressive at the drivers. It's like, how dare you own one of these things? There's absolutely no reason for somebody in a big city to be driving around one of these monsters in order just to take their kids to school. And I think we are starting to see something that's so visible as that and so obviously unsustainable. It's a very clear target, but I think obviously it's hard to see with somebody's, what you're wearing, whether it was produced sustainably or not. And I think we do need to better educate people.
To know what's sustainable and what's not sustainable, because actually people do not know, and often they don't even have a clear idea of what sustainability is. So
I just comment this suggestion. There are two sides. One side is that the expectation is that the consumer will become a consumer actor. In Italian is consumatore, because they start to increase the attitude to understand better sustainability. On the other side, there is the part of the responsibility of the companies that need to give more information, more effective, because it's very important how the company are able to communicate to the consumer actor in order to facilitate the better choice from the point of sustainability. There are two sides of the play, of the game.
I think that one group that we've kind of haven't been focusing on is what government can do in this, and I think that, Kelly, you brought up a good example of the SUVs, which governments, I think, have done a decent job of promoting hybrid cars over SUVs and larger, more gas-guzzling cars. And I'm wondering if there are examples other than the automotive industry and we've discussed fashion. Are there other industries out there that haven't gotten that attention this is a huge suck on our sustainable resources. This is really hurting the earth, that we should be drawing attention to the scale that we've drawn attention to the automotive industry.
Well, look at the European Union tried to address the aviation industry and put a carbon tax on that, and all hell broke loose across the rest of the world. The problem is one country doing one industry at a time. It's going to take way too long to get there. As I said before, industries need to be moving together in this and taking responsibility. Governments need to be, I think if you put a carbon tax on and actually, and a high tax, something that really actually recognize the full cost to society of carbon pollution, you would solve a lot of, right across the board, a lot of industries in one go. So I think, you know, attacking the problem one industry at a time is almost a sign that politicians are not capable of doing. They're having trouble doing it, so they kind of do it a bit at a time, as much as they think they can get away with it, or where they think they have enough support to do these one thing. I mean, I think in the US, for example, we have this new fuel efficiency legislation, and it happened mainly, I think, in this brief time when Obama privatized the automotive companies. You know, he was able to do it because he owned them at that point in time. You know, that was a very limited window of opportunity that he had. So I think that I think we need much bigger government action and incentives. And the biggest one, of course, is fossil fuel subsidies. I mean, do you realize that we are subsidizing fossil fuels about 6 times more than we do renewables? I mean, you know, as I said in the outset, they promise they're going to deal with climate change, hold temperature rise below 2 degrees, and yet they're still paying companies in terms of direct subsidies or in terms of foregone taxes, tax breaks, to continue to produce and use fossil fuels. And then they complain, people complain about, oh, the price of renewables and subsidies on wind or whatever. I mean, it's absolutely upside down and backwards.
I think to do what you're asking, we'd have to send these companies to school, really, you know? Because a lot of times I'm in the company of people who are heads of companies, and it's like talking to a brick wall, you know? Their concern is the bottom line. How much we made last year, how much we need to make next year. I mean, it comes down again to the bottom line. If they fear that you're going to remove even that much of their bottom line, they're going to go after you and not let you go after them. You have to break that fear of these companies.
They have to see as an opportunity. And the more the market, the final consumer, will be educated and will insert sustainability in their decision-making, purchasing process, the more company will immediately shift. Immediately shift. I think that to pretend that a profit-oriented corporation with the stock market, they cannot change just because it's beautiful. They have to have an economic motivation. If the demand is coming from the market, means by the final consumer, that would be the startup of a revolution, I think.
Are there any other questions from the audience that we haven't heard yet? Yeah.
We actually have a question from Twitter.
Oh, great, yeah.
From the Italian Climate Network. How can we address greenwashing, which has become a big problem?
Greenwashing. Just to repeat in case people couldn't hear, the question from the Italian Climate Network is that on Twitter was how can we address greenwashing, which has become a major problem?
But I think that when we talk about greenwashing is the opportunity to understand and, let's say, identify if some action are or not greenwashing is affected to the people that give opinion on the company. Of course, depends from the opportunity that the people can understand better if is as the discussion that I stated before, when we are able to understand if the company is sustainable or not, if the action that the company put in place are nearest to the core business or not, but is affected to the people that can evaluate the companies.
I think, you know, we've been talking already about how networked youth are these days, and in general, social media becoming so important. I think companies have a harder time getting away with it if people can be made aware of it and spread it through social networks. You just call them on it. You have to expose it. You know, the media should be doing that job better. It doesn't always do it so well. But I think Twitter, Facebook, there's such a more immediate reaction when you start exposing these things quickly and virally, and I think it does have an impact. So I would just say just expose it wherever you see it is the main solution, and spread it.
And we have time for one more question if anyone else in the audience has something they'd like to ask, or else I'll have another question. But I just wanted to make sure everyone that wanted to ask got the opportunity. All right, so my last question is, where do you see the future of corporate social responsibility going, and the topic of, you know, this panel being corporate social responsibility and global advocacy. So what are the partnerships that we're going to see in the future that are going to make change?
Well, I think holding this, you know, for the company Alcantara to hold something like this is a powerful beginning, because as you so rightly said, no one has challenged the fashion world. And perhaps starting today, we have challenged the fashion world. It's a beginning. Let's build on it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, you know, marketing exists for a reason. It influences consumer behavior. And I think, you know, the reason I keep using the H&M example is because they are such a kind of leader in affordable priced fashion. And if it becomes the kind of cool thing to do to kind of buy sustainable and wear sustainable, you'll see other brands following suit and trying to jump on that bandwagon. And just as you pointed out, the kind of gas-guzzling SUVs are not kind of in vogue anymore. We'll see that kind of trend for buying cheap clothes that are produced in China hopefully go out the window as well. I mean, the price issue is definitely a very valid point, and we need to see prices either go up for, well, we need to eradicate the kind of cheap mass-produced stuff. But, you know, the kind of popularity of stores like Whole Foods, you know, you're seeing consumers kind of definitely thinking more about what they're buying. It's just a shame that the people who maybe don't have the funds to shop there are only left with the option of buying mass-produced cheaper stuff. So that needs to change. And I think big brands need to take the lead in kind of making all brands feel the same way.
I am optimistic. There are not other opportunity, other plan. There is just plan A, as a campaign that was launched by British company many years ago. I am optimistic because I think that the consumer can become a consumer actor, and the company can continue to put in place some experiment to become more sustainable, because the life is an experiment. I have just a kindly request for Lucy, because when you mentioned, for Betty, because I would like to ask you, when you mentioned some case, of course, you have, first of all, mentioned Alcantara case, but remember also Autogrill case. Thank you.
No, I told you when I came I should have shares in your company, because I eat at your grills constantly. I'm back and forward to Basilicata, yeah. And you've saved my life. Can I have shares in your company?
I mentioned this request for this reason, because I would like that you give...
Save my life. You have, thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you.
So I think the most important partnerships that need to be made in the corporate sector on this issue of CSR has got to be competitive companies in the same branch. because any one company that tries to do the right thing, buy sustainably, whatever, anything that costs a lot of money to implement, if you do it alone and you get slammed on your next quarterly report and your competitors just keep doing it unsustainably, you get punished for it. So unless that changes, a partnership in which competitive companies actually agree they are going to all implement this particular thing at the same time so they all get hit with the costs and doesn't disadvantage one over the other, that's the way we can get fast, transformative change.
Yeah, I think that if we saw some sort of global movement together like that, moving in parallel, that would be absolutely incredible. And I want to just thank everyone again for joining us today. I've learned so much from the panelists, and I hope everyone watching on the live stream as well as live has the same. And of course, we can continue this conversation on Twitter, continuing to use the hashtag C4C Alcantara. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much.